Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nathan, and this is the Camden Haven Anglican Church Drill Down. So good to be with you. The Drill Down is where our church spends some time on a Wednesday night online thinking about the passage or topic that we looked at on Sunday. You can check out any of those sermons and services that we have done. If you want to find it, look at the teaching there, no worries, go for it. And then we follow that up on the drill down. But without any further ado, let's jump in. Right, well, tonight we're going to talk about the power of poverty thinking. Now, you might say, no, you've got that wrong. It's meant to be the power of positive thinking. But I want to say that the power of poverty thinking is even stronger than the power of positive thinking. We're going to look at Zephaniah tonight. We're going to jump straight into it because we've got some great stuff to look at. And I hope that you've got Zephaniah open in front of you, or you on your computer, or on your phone, or whatever it might be. G'day to those watching. I can see Linda's there, and that's really good to see you. Now, I want to start by saying I have found this book on Zephaniah to be fantastic. It actually does Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah, and the guy there is Thomas Renz. And this is probably the best I've found on this. And I think maybe even Thomas Renz, pretty great on all the minor prophets. Revolutionary, really. So I found this very helpful. Just wanted to share that with you in case you ever want to check out some of Thomas Renz's stuff. It's really good. So let's jump in to Zephaniah. Why don't we do that? So I'll do that and that, and here we go. So you see here the word of the Lord that came to Zephaniah, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, during the reign of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah. So we have a genealogy, and it's a little bit more than most other of the minor prophets, but it's not like he's just done his family tree and he's found someone famous in it, so he's telling everybody, like we often hear people who find someone famous in their family tree. The people who are famous in his family tree are Hezekiah and Josiah. Now, Hezekiah and Josiah, let's do that. As Hezekiah and Josiah. Now, Hezekiah and Josiah were kings of Israel, and in a long line of evil kings, Hezekiah and Josiah stood out as being good kings. I want to show you that by looking at 2 Kings 18. I've just changed the page there, we can see that. And this is the explanation of Hezekiah's reign in 2 Kings 18. You can read 1 Kings and 2 Kings, and you will, as the heading says, you'll be able to understand the different kings of Israel and of Judah and see where they stand. You can see here in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Eliah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. So we've got Hezekiah beginning to reign. And he was 25 years old when he became king. So just a little bit older, a little bit younger, I should say, than most of you guys. But anyway, he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. That's a long reign. 29 years. Be good to compare the other people, how long they reigned. His mother's name was Abijah, son of Zechariah. He did what was right. And here we go. Here's the bit. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. And so let's highlight that. And so we see here that if you looked at the other kings, you would find they don't do what is right in the eyes of the Lord, but here Hezekiah does what is right. And what is it that was right that he did? Well, he dealt with idolatry. That's what he was dealing with, getting rid of idols in Israel and Judah. So he removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made For up to that time, Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nehushtan or something like that. So even the Israelites took good godly gifts and turned them into idols. John Calvin said, our hearts are idol-making factories. We make an idol out of anything. And idolatry remains one of our great barriers and challenges in the Christian life. Even when talking about greed is idolatry, that is something that really speaks to our world today, doesn't it? But not only are we talking about Hezekiah here, but we're also talking about Josiah. Now look at this one. Josiah was only 8 years old when he became king, and he ruled in Jerusalem 31 years. See, another long reign. His mother's name again, given a mother's name, and here we go again, same formula. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and completely followed the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. So let's highlight that. So you can see here we have, and then what happens here in the rest of the passage, and I encourage you to have a read of this. So we're looking at 2 Kings chapter 22. You get the story of Josiah, and it's not actually that long, and you can get a bit of a picture of what happened there. But what you would see if you read that Josiah story is that Josiah was deeply into reformation of the of Israel. So it's good news. Now let's go back to Zephaniah. And we find here that it's in Josiah's time that Zephaniah is prophesying. And so when I read that, I thought, well, this is a very positive time. This is a time of reformation in Israel, and so you'd expect there to be an excellent message. But the message is, well, I don't know if you'd call it great or not. I will sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away both man and beast. So highlight that one. We'll do that pink. And I'll sweep away the birds in the sky. That one. The fish in the sea. And the idols that cause the wicked to stumble. When I destroy all mankind on the face of the earth, declares the Lord. So we'll get back to that. So you can see really here a reversal of Genesis 1 and 2. Some people have seen in this a reference to the flood, and I suppose the fact that people do hear a reference to the flood, you would probably say, yeah, well, there probably is then some sort of resonating with the flood narratives. Here, though, however, quite specifically, it is a reversal of Genesis. So it's a decreation, a reversal of creation, which I think is really saying that what is needed in Judah is not only reformation, because certainly Josiah's reforms will delay judgment, but they only delay it or postpone it. They do not cancel it. What is required is a total reset. And what we're going to find is that during Zephaniah, what the problem in Josiah's time was wealthy complacency brought on by compromising leaders. The wealthy were complacent, and this was brought on by compromised leaders, compromised priests. And that's what we're going to see. The problem here in Israel is complacency. So the reason this is an issue is not only because God wants his people to be wholehearted, but a wholehearted people will have a message for the rest of the world. And Israel's mandate was always to see the nations to come in. The nations were to see Israel shining like a bright light on a hill, city on a hill, and they were to attract the nations, attract them because they were living the way the true God would want them to live. And if you could have been there back there in that time, you would have seen that the gods of the the gods of the other nations were ruthless and not involved, judgmental, and just downright dodgy, really. The gods of the nations we find are really no gods at all, and the God of Israel is the one true living God, the living and true God as talked about in Thessalonians. And so what we find about that God is he's good and he's fair and he's just, unlike the other gods of the nations who are actually a lot like people, who are, a little bit just get a little bit itsy, that sort of thing, and one day they're happy and one day they're not. That sort of happens. So let's move on. He says here in verse 4, I'll stretch out my hand against Judah. So what we're seeing here is the first group of people to be judged is Judah. And what is this complete wiping out or sweeping away? What's it going to mean? Well, it is there. I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all who live in Jerusalem. I will destroy every remnant of Baal worship in this place. So just notice there, it's not I will completely destroy this place, but I will destroy every remnant of Baal worship in this place. And the names of the idolatrous priests, those who bow down on the roofs to worship the starry host, those who bow down and swear by the Lord, but also swear by Molech. So what we see here is leaders who are compromised. You see, they're swearing by the Lord and swearing by Molech. Molech was a Philistine god and an ancient Near Eastern god, and pretty horrible, child sacrifice, all sorts of things like that. And somehow but popular, and somehow the priests of Israel's time were adding a little bit of Molech worship into how things were going. And so it was compromised. And this compromise is just simply not good because what happens? Compromised leaders send a mixed message, and a mixed message means mixed alliances for the followers. The followers think that they're able to follow the Lord and follow Molech, have a foot in both camps, happy in two places, and the Lord's saying no. Look at verse 7, be silent before the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near. Now, what we're going to find here is a repetition of the word day or day of the Lord. Zephaniah is probably, I think, the most prolific user of the day of the Lord of any other book in the Old Testament. So as we're going, you could probably count up. There's one there, day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited. And I think the funny thing here is there is a day, and that is coming. This day that is coming back then. This day is a day of invitation. It's a party that's going to be happening, but the ones that the Lord has invited are actually the sacrifice. And what we're going to find out is that wealthy in Israel at that time were the party people. They were the people with lots of money. They were the people with the fine clothes. They were the people with the lovely houses, with the big properties up in the hills. And they were used to coming to parties. And here the Lord is inviting them to a party, as they would invite people to parties. But the Lord is going to say, but you're the main course. You're the sacrifice. So let's have a look at who is invited to this party and who are going to be sacrificed. On the day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish who? The officials and the king's sons. So we've got the upper class and all those clad in foreign clothes. Now we ask, what is it about foreign clothes? Some have said that this means that the priests were not taking note of the garments that were required of them to wear from places like Leviticus, and beginning to be a bit lax there, and so were conducting the ceremonies but not really dressed in the clothes that they were meant to be dressed in. That could be right, but I don't think it probably is. Again, indebted to Thomas Renz here, who actually points out in context the whole of Zephaniah has a problem with the wealthy. And those who were wearing foreign clothes at the time were people who didn't need to source their clothes locally. They were wealthy enough to get the latest fashions from the nations around. And so in some sense, those clad in foreign clothes is a sign of those wealthy ones. So here we've got the wealthy ones. The next bit is that they avoid stepping on the threshold and who fill the temple of their gods with violence and deceit. So let's have a look at that one. It's a syncretism that has set in. And here we've got I'm just going to scroll up to where I was looking at here. And yes, so the bit about them avoiding stepping on the threshold, this bit here, avoiding stepping on the threshold. Why didn't that work? There we go. It sort of seems to be picking up something that happened in 1 Samuel chapter 5, when the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and put it in their temple with the god Dagon, and in the morning when they woke up and went into the temple, their Dagon had fallen over before the Ark. And this happened on a couple of nights, and one night Dagon's head broke off and fell on the threshold. And so there was this tradition that happened from then that they avoided stepping on the threshold because that's where Dagon's head had fallen off. Great God whose head falls off. But here it seems that somehow, I don't know if they were actually doing this same thing, but in this way it's talking about a compromised worship that's going on. There is things happening in the Israelite worship that resembled things happening in Philistine worship. So you can see there's this compromise going on. And the next bit there is, they fill the temple of their gods with violence and deceit. Now that word gods is really just lords, and it is violence and deceit is usually referring to the violence and deceit against the poor. And so here again we've got a reference to the wealthy, although a little bit veiled for us to see. The wealthy are those who are clad in foreign clothes, who have mixed up their religion with other things, and who are actually manipulating and doing the poor out of their dollars, not paying them properly, doing violence, that sort of thing. The violence was not only physical violence, but moral violence. And this is what's happening with the wealthy towards the poor of the time. And here is where Zephaniah is really focusing in on the wealthy. Is that all he says? No, he says that more. On that day, declares the Lord. Again, there's that idea. On that day. And there. On that day, declares the Lord, a cry will go up from the fish gate, wailing from the new quarter, a loud crash from the hills. Now, again, this is where the wealthy live. The wealthy live up from the fish gate. They live in the new quarter. They live up in the hills. They have up big high places to be able to live and make their places. A bit like here. You build up on the hill. You're a bit better than those who live down in the cheap seats. Here we go, verse 11. Wail, you who live in the market district. There you go again. Market district. It's merchants being wiped out. It's the wealthy. It's who trade with silver. All who trade with silver will be destroyed. At that time I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are what? Complacent. So here complacency is the problem. Again, saying that a compromised leadership will produce a complacent people, because a mixed message will create mixed alliances. And that's not okay with the Lord, because as long as his people are compromised or complacent, they deprive the world of the message about the Lord. And this needs to happen. Now, isn't this just so true in our time? When some of our churches are just plain dead. some of our ministers are just interested in getting the day done and everyone being happy with them or whatever. But really, that's not a church that's actually able to reach out to the world. And God wants the nations to come to him. God wants us to be a light to the nations. And if we're complacent, that light is dimmed. And so we ought to be making sure that we're not complacent, sort of half this, half that, but full on. At that time, I will search Jerusalem with lamps. It's the idea not that it's night time and he has to turn the lights on, but it's going to be a real search. He's going to go through Israel with a fine-tooth comb and find out what's going on there. He will punish those who are complacent, who are like the wine left on its dregs. So when the wine settles, the dregs are at the bottom. And so when the wine's swished around, then it's all in it, it's okay. But when it's swished to the bottom, you drink one of those dregs, make you throw up. Well, that's what he's saying. The complacent are making him throw up, that makes him want to vomit. And so he's going to get rid of those. They think the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad, which is really saying, not that they saying the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad, but who think the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad, which really means that they feel they can just live the settled, room temperature, lukewarm, religious life, and everything will be okay, that God won't do anything. The fact that they're living that way suggests that they don't think God will do anything. And so that's what they're saying there. But see what verse 13, their wealth will be plundered, their houses demolished. Though they build houses, they will not live in them. Though they plant vineyards, they will not drink the wine. The great day of the Lord is near. Again, see that? Great day, coming near and coming quickly. The cry on the day of the Lord is bitter. The mighty warrior shouts his battle cry. That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, dark and blackness and clouds, or etc., etc., etc. I'll bring such distress on all people that they'll grope around like those who are blind, because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood will be poured out like dust, and their entrails like dung, neither their silver nor their gold. Notice there another reference to the wealthy. Neither their silver or gold will be able to save them on the day of the Lord's wrath. In the fire of his jealousy, the whole earth will be consumed, for he will make a sudden end of all who live on the earth. Now, the idea of earth here in Zephaniah is probably better thought of as region, the whole region. Because what we find in chapter 2 is the whole region is then affected. So what God is doing is judging, and this fire of his jealousy, notice, it's the fire of his jealousy or the fire of his passion, is what is going to do it. So it's a refining fire. We saw then it's going to burn out all the remnants of Baal worship. It's not going to burn everything. It's going to burn out worldliness. So he's not wiping out the world. He's wiping out worldliness. That's what he's on about. And if the wealthy remain in their particular state of complacency, then they too will be burned away. They'll be part of the problem. They're part of the dregs that need to be got rid of, and that sort of thing. So that's chapter 1. Let's have a look. And because what we find in chapter 2 is this summons to know that this day is coming and to do something about it. So gather yourselves together, you shameful nation, before the decree takes effect and the day passes like wind-blown chaff, before the Lord's fierce anger comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's wrath comes upon you. So here's this call, the day is coming, change today, that sort of thing. So, but the change that Zephaniah is calling the people to, he's calling specifically the rich people to be like the poor people. And the way we know that is this idea here of gather yourselves together, is not simply a call for people to all get together in some place and gather. It's a call, rather, this idea of gather together is scrape together. It's what the poor person has to do. Scrape together, scrape 2 pennies together. Or that's called rub 2 pennies together. But, scrape what food they can find together. Because a person who is in poverty has to cast themselves upon the Lord, but a person who is wealthy doesn't have to cast themselves upon the Lord, and their wealth creeps in. It's the deceitfulness of wealth, Jesus says. Their wealth creeps in and creates in them a type of faith that is really lukewarm and doesn't urgently call on the name of the Lord. There's no dependence or trust in the Lord because they have money. And I think this is for us too, isn't it, to think about. We have money. We have lots of money. And we have so much money that we can go to the local store and just buy what we need. But now, take it that when things start to, when there's nothing on the storeroom shelves, suddenly what do we begin to do? We begin to panic. Oh, Lord, what am I going to do if there's nothing in the Woolworths shelves? Well, that's the sort of idea. We need to have a poverty thinking. That's the power of poverty thinking. The power of poverty thinking is the power of dependent thinking, to make sure that even in our wealth that we're depending on God for his provision, that we're depending on him and trusting him. This is the importance here and the power of poverty thinking, because wealth thinking creates self-sufficiency and independence. Poverty thinking creates a God dependence and not a self-sufficiency, but a God sufficiency, and finding not a God deficiency. And so what we see here is this real call to the wealthy to come out of their complacency. And I wonder if you need to hear that. I wonder if you're complacent. And did you know that the reason you're probably complacent is because you've got plenty of money? And you probably don't need to call on the Lord for much, because you can just call on your credit card or your bank card or whatever it might be. We need to be continually saying, Lord, thank you that you've given me what I've got. So I'm not saying that money is the problem. The love of money is the root of all evil. That's all kinds of evil. That's the verse from Timothy. And what we need to again and again realize is that poverty is not what saves, but a poverty thinking does save, because poverty thinking is humility, which is where exactly he goes next. Have a look here. Seek the Lord, all you humble of the land, you who do what he commands. Seek righteousness, seek humility, or perhaps you will be sheltered on the day of the Lord's anger. So that day is coming. There is this call for people to be humble. And notice there it's seek righteousness. It's seek the Lord. Let's highlight that. And seek righteousness and seek humility. The idea here is that it doesn't come naturally. We need to actually intentionally seek. So in the New Testament, Jesus will say, seek God's kingdom first. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And it's in the context of being concerned about what we wear and what we eat and those things. He's saying, no, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. It is the power of poverty thinking. So keep going along with that. Verse 4 actually has a F-O-R in the beginning of it. It says there, so it's linked with what comes previously. For Gaza will be abandoned and Ashkelon left in ruins. At midday, Ashdod will be emptied and Ekron uprooted. So there's that idea of 1 to 4 there, is you need to watch out for that day, because those who be destroyed in that day, you don't want to be destroyed with them. You don't want to be the so-called the wealthy who are self-righteous. You want to be people who are seeking humility. And then from following on there, we just see this list of nations that will be judged. And we see, first of all, Philistia, which is really, don't worry about those titles. Remember, leave the titles out, scrub them all out, do what you can. And Gaza will be abandoned, Ashkelon left in ruins. At midday, Ashdod will be emptied, which is the idea at midday. So it won't take much. It'll take half a day to deal with them, and uprooted. So continually there's this, and I'll read it in a moment, but what we need to see is the day that Zephaniah is talking about is the day that Babylon comes in and defeats and destroys all the surrounding nations, and they become the new superpower. They overtake from Assyria. So they deal with Assyria. They're the ones that take out Nineveh. So you can see what happens is that Babylon comes in, and who do they take back to Babylon? They take the cream of the crop. They leave all the poor behind. So what you've got is those that are wealthy and well-dressed and upper class and educated and got skills, who are counting and trusting in those things. They're the ones that get taken away. And who's left? The humble and poor. They're the ones that are left in Jerusalem. This part is talking about the day and the nations around. So basically what it does is it says, those to the south of you, Judah, will be destroyed. Those to the north of you will be destroyed. Those to the west of you, those to the east of you. Next stop is Judah. So woe to you who live by the sea, you Kerathite people. So we've talked about Gaza to the south. We've talked about to the sea, which is to the east. The word of the Lord is against you, Canaan, land of the Philistines. He will destroy you and none will be left. The land by the sea will become pastures, having wells for shepherds and pens for flocks. The land will belong to the remnant of the people of Judah. And the remnant are who? The poor. Who do the poor represent? They represent the humble. And remember, God gives grace to the humble. He opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The land will belong to the remnant of the people of Judah. There they will find pasture in the evening. They will lie down in the houses of Ashkelon. The Lord their God will care for them and restore their fortunes. Restore their fortunes, important point, because that will come up again at the end of Zephaniah. So we might just highlight that. So what we see here is that the nations around Israel will become the possession of the humble in Israel. The meek will inherit the earth. Remember Jesus said that? Well, this is sort of what's going on here. Some more of those nations. I've heard in the insults of Moab. So notice that in the insults and the taunts. These are things with our lips that we speak. Who insulted my people and made threats against their land. Therefore, as surely as I live, declares the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, surely Moab will become like Sodom and the Ammonites like Gomorrah, the place of salt, weed and salt pits, waste forever. The remnant of my people will plunder them. The survivors of our nation will inherit the land. See there, that whole thing. Remnant, humble, poor, dependent, trusting people. And they will inherit all of those places around. The meek will inherit the earth. This is what they get in return for their pride, for insulting and mocking the people of the Lord Almighty. The Lord will be awesome to them when he destroys all the gods of the earth. Distant nations will bow down to him. Now, just see that little thing. Distant nations will bow down to him. The result of this sweeping away of worldliness will be worship. So it's not that they're all being swept away and killed. It's that they're being refined so that they worship. And so that's what we're seeing here with that one. All of them in their own lands. You Cushites too will be slain by the sword. And then Assyria. Assyria is the one we've been looking at. Assyria was the one of the main characters in Jonah, wasn't it? It was also the main character in Nahum. And now here also it's going to be destroyed. And basically what it is that Babylon comes through, destroys Assyria. Assyria was the great superpower for hundreds of years. Babylon grows into their boots and takes on Assyria and destroys them. He will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, leaving Nineveh utterly desolate and dry as the desert. Flocks and herds will lie down there, creatures of every kind, the desert owl, the screech owl, and will roost on her columns. Fascinating that actually in the early 1900s, when when Nineveh was discovered again and then excavated, it was the home of all wild animals. It was a desolate place. It was absolutely no one there. You would not have known that this was the greatest empire in the world, just become a house for screech owls, whatever they are, and that sort of thing. Their hooting will echo through the windows. Rubble will fill the doorways, the beams of cedar exposed. This is the city of revelry that lived in safety. She said to herself, I am the one, and there is none beside me. What a ruin she has become, a lair for wild beasts. All who pass by her scoff and shake their fists. Well, we're up to chapter 3. So you can see there that Zephaniah has spoken against all of these other nations around Israel, and now he speaks to an unnamed nation. So you've got to work out who's he talking to. Now the problem is that the editors have put here Jerusalem. So we're thinking, oh, okay, he's talking about Jerusalem. But you don't actually know that. It doesn't say Jerusalem at first. And so you're meant to be wondering, who could this terrible nation be? Because they are the ultimate in terrible ones. All the nations around have done terrible things, but this final one is super terrible. And what they find out, it's actually them. It's Israel and Judah. So woe to the city of oppressors, rebellious and defiled. She obeys no one. She accepts no correction. She does not trust in the Lord. She does not draw near to her God. Her officials, remember, her officials within her are roaring lions. Her rulers are evening wolves who leave nothing for the morning. That is, they just take it all. They just consume out of their wealth. Her prophets are unprincipled, and they are treacherous people. Her priests profane the sanctuary and do violence to the law. So the ones that were meant to show what is holy, that's the priests, they're now making it common. They're doing the opposite of what they're meant to do. The Lord within her is righteous. He does no wrong. Morning by morning he dispenses justice, and every new day he does not fail. Yet the unrighteous know no shame. So they're very different to the Lord. Verse 6, I've destroyed nations, their strongholds are demolished, I've left their streets deserted, with no one passing through, their cities are laid waste, they are deserted and empty. Of Jerusalem, now we know it's Jerusalem that he's talking about. Here's the one that hasn't listened to God. Now put it this way, the other nations didn't have the law, and so they're not culpable for not hearing the law because they didn't have it. But they are culpable for the way they've acted in not loving their neighbours, in not loving others. Israel, on the other hand, is double culpable because not only are they acting like the nations, but they're also acting against the law that they've received. And so here he says, of Jerusalem I thought, surely you would fear me and accept correction. Then her place of refuge would not be destroyed, nor all my punishments come upon her. But they were still eager to act corruptly in all they did. Therefore wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day I will stand up to testify. I have decided to assemble the nations, to gather the kingdoms, and to pour out my wrath upon them in all my fierce anger. The whole world will be consumed by the fire of my jealous anger. Now notice that one has been repeated. That was what was said before. So really that functions to create a bit of an envelope between those two sections. And we have in between those two sections the absolute destruction of the world. Again, the world, however, is defined here as that region. And the judgment on the world has the result of purifying the people of God and bringing nations into worship. So it's not just an angry God who's going to wipe everyone out. He's a God who wants to see worship happen. Now, what happens on that day? See, this day of the whole world being consumed by the fire of my jealous anger. That day, then I will purify the lips of the peoples. Now, this is an important one for us to see, because here is what God is going to do with those who are left. He's going to purify the lips of the people. So you could say that the wealthy, and I hope this makes sense, the wealthy were complacent. So they had Yahweh on their lips, but not in their lives. They were not living according to their confession. And so essentially they are what is called lying. That's lying, isn't it? If you say one thing but do another, that's called hypocrisy, but it's also called lying. And lying is it's this, then I'll purify the lips of the people. I'll purify them from their lies. I will take out from among them those who are not trusting in the Lord and rather trusting in their wealth. And when they are taken out, it'll be taking the liars out of the people. So the people's lips will be purified. They're taking the liars out of the nation. And then the result is that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him shoulder to shoulder. So there is a service of him as well as a speech. And it's from beyond the rivers of Cush. My worshippers, my scattered people will bring me offerings. Now Cush is Egypt. And so you could say that even beyond Egypt, people are going to come. When the lips of the people are purified, there will be worshippers even from as far as Cush. That's the sort of picture that's going on there. If you do have any questions, just put it in there for me so I know that you do have a question. We're pretty quiet tonight on the live chat, aren't we? So not many people there, but that's okay. I'm more than happy to talk to those that are here. It's fantastic. Now, so what we're seeing here is, on that day, verse 11, you, Jerusalem, will not be put to shame for all the wrongs you've done to me, because I'll remove from you your arrogant boasters. Again, you can see that wealthy are being removed. The wealthy, the foreign-clothed, mixed religion, violence against the poor, that is moral violence, they will be removed. The humble will be left. See there? Verse 12, but I will leave within you the meek and the humble, the remnant of Israel will trust in the name of the Lord. They will do no wrong. They will tell no lies. See that? Purified lips. And the lies that they're not telling, it's not that they're not telling porky pies. They probably weren't. But it's that they weren't lying, saying Yahweh on their lips, but not Yahweh in their lives. And so they are pure, they are committed, they are 100%, they are not compromised, that sort of thing. A deceitful tongue will not be found in their mouths. They will eat and lie down, and not one of them will make them afraid. No one will make them afraid. It's interesting, isn't it, that here are the meek who are the ones most likely to have reason to be afraid, but they're not afraid because the Lord is with them. And I think, when it talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, the meek will inherit the earth, the blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, all that sort of stuff. There is a lot to be afraid of, but not when you have the Lord, because even though you're weak and meek, weak is not necessarily weak, you are threatened by outside, but you have the Lord, you're able to count on him. Sing, daughter Zion, shout aloud, Israel, be glad and rejoice with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He's turned back your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm on that day. They will say to Jerusalem, do not fear, Zion, do not let your hands hang limp. The Lord your God is with you. The mighty warrior who saves, he will take great delight in you. In his love, he'll no longer rebuke you, but he will rejoice over you with singing. And there's a classic part there, is those verses. Now, what we see here is when Babylon comes through and wipes out the wealthy, this is God wiping out and they take the wealthy. This is God wiping out and doing a clean of Israel, taking out the wealthy, leaving the humble, leaving the poor. The poor are a picture of the humble. The humble are then given pure lips because they are going to be trusting in the Lord with all their hearts. And then here, the Lord your God is with you. He'll take great delight in you. In his love, he'll no longer rebuke you, or he'll quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. So there's a really wonderful and delightful picture of the Lord's pleasure with his humble people. And I will remove from you all who mourn over the loss of your appointed festivals. That is, those who mourn because all the parties aren't happening, the wealthy. At that time I will deal with all who oppressed you, that is, the wealthy. I will rescue the lame. I will gather the exiles. I will give them praise and honour in every land where they have suffered shame. At that time I will gather you. At that time I will bring you home. I will give you honour and praise among the peoples of the earth when I restore your fortunes. There's that word there. Restore your fortunes before your very eyes. That go back? Yes, it was. Or bring back your captives. Yes. So what we have right at the end here of Zephaniah is that full circle has happened. He is going to destroy the whole earth, which means he is going to purify with his jealous fire the people of Israel. And the way he's going to do that is bring Babylon through. They're going to take the wealthy back home to try to Babylonianize them. But what will be left is the poor, and those poor who are representative of the humble, and they will be blessed by God because they're people who trust. So in the end, Zephaniah is really a serious word to the wealthy believer to say, watch out for the deceitfulness of wealth, that it's stealing your worship. It's giving you an alternative to put confidence in. It's giving you an alternative, and I should say me too, it's giving me an alternative to put confidence in. I need to watch out for the deceitfulness of wealth as much as anybody else. Greg Jamison says, it's amazing the relevance it has to today's living. Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right, Greg. And it really, really speaks exactly to us. And there's a couple of things as we bring this to a finish, just to say that I think the purifying of speech, it does seem to be a little bit of a talk about a reversal of Babel, the Tower of Babel. So where speech was confused, now we have one speech. I think most of all, it's God doing a work in the humble to create for himself the people that he wants to have. He will not let his people not be his people. And so we see a fulfillment of this in Jesus. Now, Jesus is described in Isaiah 53 and 1 Peter 2 as not having, no deceit being found on his lips, which was just a bit before, wasn't it? Yes, a deceitful tongue will not be found in their mouths. Now that verse is actually a description of Jesus, and it's used as a description of Jesus. Here's the one that doesn't have mixed motives. Here's the one that doesn't have a mixed allegiance. Here's the one that he's not having his foot in both camps. He's not compromised. He is the leader of a pure people. He is not a compromised leader. And so a leader who is not compromised is actually going to lead a people who are also not compromised, who are not complacent. And so we don't want any complacency, do we, in church? But it is by the grace of God, his work in us. And so we see in the day of Pentecost, when the fire of God comes down upon the people of God and they speak other languages, but everybody understands, it is this purifying of speech. The nations are understanding, they're declaring the wonders of God. We see the fulfillment of Zephaniah, yes, in the history of Israel, but only partially. We see it most fulfilled on the day of Pentecost, when the nations begin to come in. And that's what happens in Acts, isn't it? People begin to call on the name of the Lord Jesus. Now, it's ultimately shown to be the case in Revelation. At the end of time, every tribe, every language, every nation will be worshipping the Lord, probably in different languages, but they'll all be calling on the name of the Lord. And this is the great day that we're looking forward to, and it's all the work of God and his Spirit. Well, you know, we've come up to our time. Our time is up, and so that is Zephaniah for the night. And I think it's been really great to look at Zephaniah with you, and I'm excited about Zephaniah, and I think all the minor prophets are really great. But we're going to leave it there. We're going to have a 2-week break, and then we'll be back, and we're going to be back into Matthew. So we're beginning at Matthew chapter 14, because we've looked at the other parts of Matthew as well. So I'm going to say, nice to see you, and see you later.